Hi, welcome to QC Crime Watch. I'm Linda Cook.
And I'm Sharon Wren.
And we both are going to talk about recent crimes that have happened in the Quad City area. And Sharon has a caveat that she always shares.
We are not able to give any sort of legal advice because neither one of us went to school for it, first off, and it would be a conflict of interest.
Right.
And you want to get legal representation from someone with a degree.
Right.
Yes.
So I have one story I'm going to talk about today, but sort of branching off in that story, I'm going to talk about meth because this story involves meth. A lot of our stories involve meth.
Sadly.
And I want to talk about what meth really does to the body and why it's so hard once you're addicted to break that addiction.
Okay.
So without any further ado, a Burlington man was sentenced last week to 288 months, that's 24 years, in federal prison for possessing, this is interesting, a distribution quantity of meth. That means more than you'd use for personal use. And he also had a loaded gun.
Oh.
So this is from a news release from the courts. Chad Jacob Runnels, 49, sold and received meth during several controlled purchases. That is, someone undercover bought from him. He sold to law enforcement. And in September 2024, law enforcement executed search warrants at his residence and adjacent stash house and found about 3.5 pounds of meth.
I don't even want to know what the street value of that is.
I don't either. A loaded gun, and he also had more than $10,000 in cash. Based on the evidence obtained during the investigation, Runnels was responsible, now get this, for distributing more than 65 pounds of methamphetamine.
Oof.
So
That's not personal use. No, siree, Bob.
he had a prior conviction, so he is prohibited from possessing firearms, and he was convicted for possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver as a habitual offender, and a 2013 conviction for domestic abuse assault, that's impeding airflow. So that was in the Iowa District Court for Warren County. So he has a record.
Right.
After completing his term of imprisonment, Runnels will be required to serve a 5-year term of supervised release. There is no parole in the federal system.
Nope.
Now, this case is part of Project Safe Neighborhoods. I've written this over and over and over again, and I had a blurry idea of what it was, but this is what it is. It's a program that brings together all levels of enforcement, and it's a community approach to reduce violent crime. So you want to get people like this with guns and drugs off the streets.
Right.
In 2021, this violent crime reduction strategy launched, and it's been going pretty strong for the last 4 years. His arrest was part of this program. It's Department of Justice's Project Safe Neighborhoods. It's a nationwide program, so you can have federal, state, local, all involved in this program. It's coordinated by the U.S. Attorney's offices in 94 different judicial districts and throughout the 50 states and U.S. territories. And so when you hear about Project Safe Neighborhoods, you can kind of figure out what kind of an approach was taken in the arrest involved. In other words, a multi-layered approach. So Sharon has some stuff she wants to share, and she has one really wild one today. And then when we come back, I will tell you a little bit more about meth. It's something we talk about all the time, but we don't really understand.
Right.
Sharon,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Little palate cleanser, if you will.
Yes.
A man from Bettendorf was arrested after Davenport police say he drove recklessly in a U-Haul with somebody hanging on the side step. Yep. Court records say Davenport police responded to People's Mini Storage on East 53rd Street on August 18th for a damage complaint involving a U-Haul, the big trucks, striking several fixtures and catching on fire. The defendant, identified as 38-year-old William Brandel, allegedly drove the U-Haul at a high rate of speed in a private parking lot with the person hanging onto the driver's side step of the truck. He hit a guardrail and a pole in the parking lot, causing about $2,500 in damages. Now, he fled before police came, but witnesses told him that Mr. Brandel shouted that, and I quote, he didn't care about his driving and was doing it on purpose. A warrant was issued for Mr. Brandel's arrest on August 22nd, and he was arrested a month later on September 22nd. He has been charged with second-degree criminal mischief, leaving the scene of an accident and reckless driving, and he has a preliminary hearing on October 2nd.
And we'll be following that case.
Oh, yeah. That's,
Wow.
yeah. You just don't hear about people doing things in a U-Haul.
No,
I mean, perhaps, hauling large quantities of drugs, perhaps, but not driving with somebody.
hanging off the side. So, and you have another story too. Now,
Yes,
we'll
yes.
go back to meth here for just a moment, if I
Yes.
might. Methamphetamine is the same as meth, and
Right.
it's very addictive. So here's what it does. It creates a strong sense of euphoria. You feel really, really good,
Mm.
which contributes to its, addictive qualities.
Hmm.
I am told that when people use this drug, that first high is absolutely fantastic, and you search for that. You want it again, and you never can find it.
I think don't they call it like chasing the dragon or
Chasing
something
the
like
dragon.
that?
That's what I've
Oh.
heard too, and so it must be right if we both heard
Mhm.
that. It can be a powder, it can be a pill, and sometimes they combine it with caffeine, Sharon, or sometimes it's clear, chunky crystals. I give Sharon a hard time because she drinks caffeine.
I
so
love my coffee.
I know you do. So the street names, meth, crystal, crank, ice, speed, glass, and I'm sure there are 100 more that are being used that I'm not familiar with. It can be ingested orally, it can be snorted, it can be smoked, and it can be ingested. Now, the short-term effects are that rush of euphoria I talked about, increased energy and alertness, decreased appetite, increased heart rate and blood pressure, erratic, violent, and sometimes bizarre behavior, and psychotic symptoms like paranoia and hallucinations.
Now, way back in the 20th century, like in the 60s and the 70s, didn't they use stimulants like that for women to lose weight?
And I think some people do think, well, I'll just use this for a little while. I won't be hungry. I'll have all this energy.
I can stop.
This is not the way to go.
No.
With repeated use, you can have, and you hear about meth mouth because
Yeah.
it rots
That's
teeth. You
right.
can have significant dental problems, extreme weight loss, malnutrition, the skin stores from the compulsive scratching.
Yeah.
That's part of
yeah,
it.
You see that.
Heart issues, you can have a heart attack, you can have a stroke, and organ damage to the brain, kidneys, and liver.
Well, that makes sense. If it is a stimulant, it could affect the heart.
It can, and it does. And the psychological effects include the anxiety, paranoia, the hallucinations, violent, aggressive behavior, and irreversible brain damage affecting memory, motor skills, and learning. So, here we have this addictive drug that does what? It affects our dopamine levels. Dopamine is the brain's reward chemical, and that creates an intense high. Now, you and I have found our dopamine in things like Rick Springfield concerts. I know that because you were with me.
Yes.
And we love music. We love being around people.
Right.
We enjoy writing. There are things,
Movies.
movies. There are things we enjoy doing that increases the dopamine effect in our brain, and so does meth. But the problem is, you want that over and over and over again without the drug. You can be very, very tired, depressed, sleepy, and have an intense craving for that drug. So the treatment, counseling, cognitive behavior therapy, contingency management, but they don't always work, and the person really has to want to stop and go into treatment. The medication can help manage symptoms, but there's no FDA approved specifically for meth withdrawal. Support programs, peer recovery, Narcotics Anonymous,
Right.
that kind of thing help. And medically supervised detox, inpatient and outpatient rehab. So if you want to increase your dopamine today without trying meth,
Legally.
exercise does this too. So does, especially aerobic exercise. Sunlight increases the production of vitamin D, which increases your dopamine, the happy feeling in your brain. Music, eating nutritious foods. I found this one interesting. Swimming or showering in cold water.
No.
That never did much for me, but apparently it does for some people. Meditation and mindfulness will make you happier. Also enhancing dopamine, however, are cocaine and heroin.
Better to have a warm bubble bath than some of the less legal things.
Yes. So I just thought it would be interesting to
That's
go
kind of
into that.
interesting.
Why is meth so addictive?
Well, you
So-
know, you hear cocaine, it's a stimulant. Like, well, what's the
Right.
draw with?
Right. So there you are. And there are, you know, if you go, there are all kinds. Google this if you want to know more. But meth is a difficult one to break,
Yeah.
difficult habit to break. So Sharon, you have something else here besides the U-Haul.
Yes, I have a woman in the Scott County Jail who Bettendorf police say tried to pass several stolen checks over 2 years ago. Yes. Now, the criminal complaint uses a term that I was not familiar with, and I don't know if you know it or everyone else, but it refers to the felony lane gang activity. Now, that's not a new name for
I
a
know
gang.
what that is.
You know what that is.
Felony lane.
Yes, that is not a gang. It's not like the Crips or anything.
No.
That refers to organized multi-state fraud rings where participants break into cars, steal the checks and identification, and then use the ID to cash the forged checks.
Right.
The name comes from going through the drive-through lane that's farthest from the
away
tower window.
because it's harder to see what's
That's
going on.
the felony drive-through
That's
lane.
that's the felony drive-through lane.
So now that we have this definition, we can go into the criminal complaint, which says in typical felony lane gang criminal activity, the defendant, identified as Rena Lamp, age 57, used 2 different vehicle burglary victims' stolen checks and identification to try and pass the checks off at the Bettendorf, Davenport, and LeClaire branches of Blackhawk Bank and Trust. This all allegedly happened on July 25th, 2023.
Okay.
Yes. Now, she passed 2 checks each at the Bettendorf and LeClaire branches, and each of those checks was for over $1,500 for a total loss to the bank of over $10,000.
Oh,
She used a fake Illinois driver's license with her photo and the victim's identification information during the fraudulent transactions. Now, these vehicle burglaries happened in Illinois. So, tried to pass the checks in Iowa. Same day, she drove to the Moline branch to try and pass them. However, this time the bank turned her down, kept the identification, and called the police. In all 4 attempts, Ms. Lamp was driving and was the only person in an SUV rented in Florida to another woman. Now, during the course of the officer's investigation, they learned that Ms. Lamp had been arrested in New England for the same kind of crime. They got her mug shots and were able to identify her by comparing the video on the bank's security videos with her distinctive appearance and a left upper arm tattoo. Now, warrants for Ms. Lamp's arrest were issued on April 23rd and 24th, 2023, and she was taken into custody on September 25th, 2025.
so it took quite a while.
About 2 years.
Okay.
She was charged with 3 counts of felony forgery, felony identity theft, felony first-degree theft, and 2 misdemeanor counts of identity theft. And she's being held on a felony interstate detainer. So she's being held in the Scott County Jail on no bond, mostly because of that detainer, and will be arraigned on October 23rd. Now, we don't know if Ms. Lamp is a local or where she's from, because that information was not in the criminal complaints.
So many questions.
Oh, we're following this one.
Okay.
Yippers.
Wow.
Well, on
Okay.
that note,
What an interesting group of arrests we had. Yes,
Yes,
we had today.
yes.
So thank you. And here, you know, it feels like summer,
yeah.
and apparently it's going to for a while. So please don't leave your car windows down. Please
leave them
lock your
unlocked.
cars and lock your houses. Stay safe out there.
We'll see you next week.